Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, and I hope you're following the 3H's of the channel. This video is all about Midwest encounters, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me, and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. I haven't really told this to too many people, but then again, I don't really know too many people that I could even tell this to, but I was on my weekly drive down to the state capital. I go through some very rural areas. Today, on my drive, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something crawling up the side of the hills leading up to the road where I was. This thing looked like a ghoul. There's no other way to really describe it. It was pure white, with a thin layer of sort of fuzz or hair, except for patches that looked like dried blood near its shoulders. It was on all fours, and I thought that it may have been a shaved bear or like an albino ape, as the color and the way it moved reminded me of those two things. The face, though, looked straight humanoid, no denying it. It looked at me with knowing eyes, and then it just changed direction to head up some of the other hills. It wasn't skittish, but it wasn't attracted either. When it turned around, it had a long, flat tail covered in similar white fur or fuzz that's on its body, but a bit longer near the end. I was driving with a female family member who also saw it. Then we got back into the car and we started freaking out. When we were halfway to the nearest town, I turned back, realizing that this may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I looked, and it was nowhere to be seen. Mind you, it could have been at the bottom of the hills, which is sort of a gully, but I couldn't see straight down without going off the road and a ways down the foothills on foot. There's a church nearby to where I saw it. I'm thinking of driving up there soon, maybe ask them if they've seen it before, or if they have any ideas what it was. I've only ever had one thing happen to me that I would consider something terrifying. It started with a dream, but I'm not sure if it was just that. So I was 13 years old. It was a school night, and I was asleep. I'm having a normal dream when suddenly it changes. It changes to a Skype call. This was 2013, by the way. They are friends of mine, or people I seem to know somehow. We are all higher ups, or somewhat important people. We planned to scare the hell out of one of our friends by dressing up as two massive 12-foot tall creatures. I am told in the dream that they were based on local legends. The creatures look like Slender Man kind of, but a lot taller, thicker, and have 6 arms. The creatures are completely black with a few colored bands, usually only one color. The arms are kind of hard to describe, but imagine long sleeves on clothing. I can't really do it justice. So I'm watching this prank happen through a camera on a Skype call in this dream. Somehow, the guy is getting spooked. He's left out in a field under a deep orange light. The light is in the center of the field, and the field is surrounded by a thick forest. I don't know where this part is. So the first friend starts to walk out of the forest, dressed as this 13-foot tall creature with yellow bands. My other friend starts to freak out as it slowly approaches him. Then there's a second creature with red bands. This one is much taller than the first, at least 16 feet tall, or So it appears. But something is off. The two people in the Skype call seem confused, saying that there's only supposed to be one of them. The person dressed up as the creature notices the other creature and starts to freak out. The larger creature sprints toward the person dressed up and attacks him. It's hard to see what's going on because of the camera. The guy under the light starts to freak out even more. And then the feed cuts out. And then I hear one of the people on the call say something along the lines of, "Holy shit, we have to get out of here. They know where you are." And then I'm jolted awake. I'm back in the Midwest. Something is pounding on my window. The pounding is very intense and repetitive. It would repeat once a second for 5 to 10 hits, and then stop for 30 seconds, and then continue. It's 4 a.m. Nobody's awake, especially not in my neighborhood. I'm too chicken shit to move, let alone check what's behind the window blinds. So I sit there for 30 to 40 minutes. The banging continues in a similar pattern, but periodically gets louder or quieter. Eventually, I got enough courage to move across my room and grab my bat. And then in one go, I basically jump back on my bed. The pounding continues. At some points, it sounds like the window is going to be beaten down. I have no idea how nobody has waken up yet from this sound. It goes on for a whole other hour. Eventually, the sun starts to come up. I get enough courage to haul ass upstairs to the living room with my bat. I can still hear the pounding all the way upstairs. It may have gotten louder or moved to another window. My parents eventually come out and ask what the hell I'm doing, clutching a bat on the couch in the corner of the living room at 5:30 a.m. I told them I was scared because of the pounding, which you could still clearly heard, but they seem in a daze. They don't seem to care or seem to pay attention to it. The pounding doesn't stop until like almost an hour later. Eventually, I have to go to school and I have to go outside. I check outside my room, my window. There's no tracks anywhere. There's about a foot of snow on the ground. Nothing within 30 feet around that could be even touching my window. The only other weird thing besides the banging was this weird material that I found outside the window. It kind of reminded me of construction ribbon, but it felt different. You couldn't pull it apart like you can with that. It seemed to maintain its shape no matter how much you stretched it. It would just go back to what it was. This was in the middle of January, so it definitely wasn't birds banging against the window. It never happened again after this. It was only the one time. It's really the only thing that's happened to me. It was the most scared I've ever been. The correlation with the dream and everything that happened after I woke up really has me wondering if it was just a dream. This is something that happened quite a few years ago, back when I was 17. A few buddies and I drive up to MPLS to hang out with some people. A few people then decide that we should go to Grey Cloud Island. Bonus points if you've been there before. The place used to be a camp of sorts for some very unsavory people, with signs that read, "We'll shoot on sight," everywhere. We heard the story about the daughter of one of the people that were higher up in this cult or group had brought home a boyfriend that her father didn't like, so he was shot, and the daughter was burned to death and thrown into a trash bag. So as you can imagine, this place is rumored to be very haunted. So once there, We decide to park under the railroad bridge. We're smoking cigarettes, and all of a sudden, I tell everybody to shut up. 10 minutes in, we begin to hear footsteps. Somebody is running up to the back of us, but there's nobody in the mirror. I peel out and turn around. I'm now parked under the bridge, facing the footsteps. Everyone notices a trash bag on the side of the tracks. We ignore it until we see a light. It looks like a train, but we can't hear anything. And then the light and train come and speed over us, unimaginably fast, and there's no sound from it, not even a little bit. At that point, I had had my fill of things of the paranormal variety, but one of my friends wants to walk to the cemetery, and I don't want to look like I'm scared among my friends. So fast forward, and we're walking through a field. There's 5 of us. The cemetery is about a half a mile or so in the woods. It's 100 yards to the trees when we start to see more white lights at the treetops, and we begin to then see shadows in the woods. Originally, we begin to think maybe some of the cult members are still here after all these years. For some reason, this didn't click in as scary, and we kept walking. And then, a shadow steps out from behind the trees. We shine our light at it. It's not a person. It's just a void of black, darkness, emptiness. We all turn and hightail back to the car. I drop the guys off right away, and the 3 of us head back to Rochester. Now, Rochester is a decent-sized city, but there's a lot of woods in the southwest and northeast sides of town. We've seen thunderbirds, wendigos, and some other really crazy stuff, but nothing we could prove outright. Anyways, I was watching my grandparents' house, and it was pretty big, so we were all hanging out in the living room that was connected to the kitchen. It had these small doors that went to the dining room, and the backyard was about 100 yards deep and 50 yards across. The living room window let us see half of it. This is the same night. We're just sitting on the couch. I let the dog out, and I start to calm down, to relax. An hour later, I then see something moving around our yard. I forgot the dog was out, so we assumed that it was a cougar, because it looked pretty damn big. I go outside with rebar, and then the dog comes barking and running upstairs, and we all laugh, but collectively shit ourselves. Scared the hell out of us. But 30 minutes later, we see something in the yard again. This is smaller, and it's crawling. I think, yeah, this is enough for me tonight. I close the blinds, and I continue watching movies with my friends. Now, the way I was sitting on the couch, if I barely looked left, the entire kitchen and dining room doorway was visible. So, fast forward to about 3 o'clock in the morning. Of course, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. This is when all the crazy stuff starts to happen. We start hearing creaking from upstairs. It's weird, because the house is new and very solid. I glance over at the kitchen. That's the general area of the noises. The doorway in the kitchen is impossibly black. The darkness looks like it's seeping into the walls of the kitchen. The entire back end of the kitchen starts to fade away to blackness. I'm tearing up kind of typing this. It filled me with an uncontrollable dread and still terrifies me just to think about. Everyone notices this eventually. They start suggesting that we should just ignore it. Maybe we're just tired. Maybe we're on edge because of the other stuff we saw tonight. I go to check the front door because we're all about to try and go to sleep. It's open. I specifically remember locking it. The bathroom is adjacent to the front door, has a mirror that shows whoever is at the door. The mirror looks distorted for some reason, so I focus on it to try and straighten myself out. The second my eyes adjust, there is a smoking, burnt girl in a white gown crawling up my leg. I look down and see my shirt tighten like somebody is wrapping their arms around me. I flail and try to run back to the kitchen. My friends are standing there. They say that I was in the landing way for 15 minutes. To me, it was just 30 seconds. I tell them what happened, and they start to eye me up and down. We're all sitting down, and then they're watching me close. I try to get up, but I can't move my arms or legs. I tell them, and they look at me like I'm possessed. They say my face looks distorted. It looks different, not like me. Everyone begins to smell sulfur, and suddenly, I black out. I come to, smoking a cigarette on the back porch with my friend. He says that he almost killed me with a crowbar. Apparently, the power turned off and then back on, along with the TV, and then I was standing up. Then I continued to walk from room to room in the house, talking about how it all felt, how it felt so weird. I ended up going down into the basement and sitting on the dirt floor for a while, just jerking my head around and randomly saying things and then laughing. They got scared, but they were worried about me, so they were holding on anything solid they could find in case I got violent. Now, the weird thing is that after this night, I heard rhythmic tapping on my stove in my kitchen, and then in the trunk of my car, until almost a year after that. This was well over 10 years ago, so you can put this map up to kind of get an idea of where we were at different points in what I'm about to tell you. I wish I could tell this properly. This is one night of my life that I was truly wondering whether I would die or not. For a bit of backstory, our location is basically in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota. We are 30 minutes from the nearest town that's even big enough for a Walmart, and an hour away from any town big enough to have a normal, albeit small, mall. I hope that gives you an idea of how middle of nowhere we are. So I had this friend, Brandon, who was my main shooting friend. It seems like we'd always launch off a few hundred rounds of 22 LR at gravel pits every couple of weeks. We trusted each other like I've never experienced since anyone as far as firearms and general camaraderie. He had a history of being kind of a troublemaker, but he was always fine around me, partially at least, because we didn't go see his other friends while I was with him. They were kind of a bunch of D-bags, and I didn't want anything to do with them for the most part. He has since abandoned them and realizes that they were nothing but a bad influence on him. Anyway, on to the real story. So one afternoon, we hung out. Brandon mentioned this abandoned farm site that had a lot of rabbits to hunt and a couple of old buildings to explore. So of course, we decided we'd go a little later and hunt to see what we could find. It was supposedly full of rabbits every time he had been there. The catch today was that there was a new guy in our normally two-man group, a cousin that Brandon wasn't very fond of. Brandon thought he was kind of an idiot, or simple, as he used to call him. My opinion of him would be equally low by the end of the day. He really was an idiot. His name was Travis. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, but this kid really was dumb AF, and it didn't take long for me to realize it. Anyway, later in the afternoon, we took off for the abandoned farm site. We parked the truck at the end of the highway to keep the element of surprise, and we sneak up the driveway. We were as quiet as possible. It was probably a little under 200 yards to the actual abandoned farm site from the end of the driveway. About half the length of the driveway was corn taller than us. The other half was a thin driveway surrounded by trees on both sides. On one side of the driveway was the main grove. The other was a 10-foot thick wall of trees with tall corn on the other side. It was late afternoon, not too far from sunset, so we had a spotlight with us in case we stayed past dark. After the end of the day, I'd wish we left at home. This is where it all really begins. We walked up the thin driveway, surrounded by trees on both sides. We eventually broke off and checked out the woods together. There were a lot of details that we noticed as the day went on that were not quite right about the place, but we didn't really put it all together until it turned into a crazy night. We went through the large section of woods. They were paths already made and plants that looked like they had just been broken off because there was still bleeding water from where it had snapped. We figured that maybe it was a deer or something. Maybe we'd scared the deer away for now. As we went to the barn, we noticed claw marks all over the ladder to get upstairs, and pretty much zero cobwebs or any signs of life other than those claw marks on the ladder rungs. Actually, there were no rabbits or any life whatsoever on the place, it seemed like. There were no birds, squirrels, or anything. We didn't even see a single fly or spider. We did think that that was a little on the weird side for an abandoned farm. There's not generally a lot going on at abandoned places, but this seemed to be on a different level. As time passed, it started to get dark. We had been shooting on and off at different pieces of junk laying around for most of the time we had been there, maybe just a couple hours. We had 2 Ruger 1022s between the 3 of us, and my 20 GA 870 pump shotgun. Travis didn't have his own gun, so we used whatever we gave him at the time, usually a 22. As night set in, we grabbed the spotlight and kept exploring around the edges of the woods and behind the buildings. The spotlight pretty much went dead in 5 minutes, even though we didn't use it much. The battery must have been absolute crap. We were about to call it a night when we heard something rustling in the woods past some of the shrubby trees. We kept hearing the noise, so we shot into the area, and then we were quiet for a minute. Then it came back again, somewhere else, but in the same general direction. Because we were so curious about this noise, we stayed way past dark, because we figured it was kind of a fun excuse to keep going. By now, it was very dark, but it was a full moon, so we could see fairly well. But we could see absolutely nothing in the woods, nothing inside the buildings, or anywheres inside the shadows. And we keep hearing the thing running and moving through the woods with more and more frequency as time went on. It would only go away for a few minutes, and then we'd hear it on the other side of the clearing behind us. It was at this point we started to get a little freaked out, because we kept hearing it change places every few minutes. It seemed to be stalking us. Eventually, we saw it jump out of the woods a foot or two and dart back in. We couldn't tell what it was, but it glared a silverish and pale color in the moonlight. It was the size of a large dog, but quick as a cat. Now we knew that we weren't just hearing things, and of course, that freaked us out even more. This went on for a long time, with just us standing there, trying to figure out how to get out of this mess. We were all scared for hours, shooting at shadows, occasionally trying to hit it. And of course, we didn't want to go down the thin driveway with trees on both sides of it and almost no light. We couldn't even get a hint of light from the spotlight by this time either. We were prepared to stay there all night, keeping guard if we had to. And keep in mind, at the time, cell phones were almost unheard of for most people, so we didn't have any communications out of there, because there would have definitely been used by the end. An hour or two into the dark night, we started hearing this thing from two places at once, or from both sides, too fast for it to only be one thing crunching around out there. We stood there and kind of backed off from the noises we were hearing because it's natural instinct to kind of back away. But we soon realized it was trying to push us into a thinner clearing, and we're almost sure they meant to do that. I'm pretty sure they wanted to get us somewhere where they could attack us from all sides, quickly. From that point, we just stayed in the center of the largest clearing, no matter what we heard. At least there was about 10 to 15 yards between us and the woods in all directions. We'd have time to shoot at anything that came for us from that distance. Eventually, around 1 a.m. or so, we decided that we'd make a run for it down the driveway. We were low on ammo. We were starting to get more worried as time passed. We decided that the three of us would go back to back in a triangle formation, covering all sides on our escape. We were 100% convinced that if we got close to the woods, they would come after us. So, we were faced with a tough decision, with the thin driveway being our only escape. Whatever these things were, they seemed so damn fast and very unfriendly and unafraid of gunfire. We'd finally made the decision to abandon the spotlight. We would each take a gun and make our escape. Myself and Travis would have the .22s, and Brandon would carry the 20 gauge. Unfortunately, Travis wouldn't abandon the dead spotlight, so he took it with him for some reason. He was clutching onto a dead spotlight more than his gun, and we couldn't convince him to set it down, even though it had zero charge. You couldn't even get a flicker of light from it. Finally, we just decided that he could take it with him down the driveway. We just wanted out of there. We were just about to leave, then we heard the noises from both sides again, and within a few seconds, I saw one of them run across the clearing on the far side of the farm site. That was not good news. It was scary enough that there might be two. Now, it's pretty much confirmed that there was at least three. We made up our minds quickly, and without wasting time, we went back to back and started down the driveway. While we knew at least one was on the opposite side of the farm and ran the wrong way to try and intercept us on the driveway, another was also on the side of the farm that we would move away from. So two of our three, quote, monsters were at as much disadvantage as possible. We finally took off. We were kind of making a slow escape with Brandon and I facing the main section of the woods and Travis facing the field, because we wanted to be the ones facing the most likely attack point, since Travis was too scared to handle anything but a dead spotlight. And he really couldn't have aimed and shot if he wanted to, because he was clutching the dead spotlight like it was his salvation. As we went along, we heard them running, kind of alongside us on the larger side of the grove, and we were really wondering if trying to escape had been a good idea or not. We were about halfway down the driveway when one of them actually lunged at Brandon and my side. Brandon pretty much instantly fired the 20 gauge in surprise, and the critter ran off. I'm quite sure that it only ran off because the gun blast surprised it just as much. It was there and gone so fast we still didn't know what it was exactly. But we were scared as we'd ever been because the woods were less than 10 feet away on either side of us, and those things were so fast. After we cleared the grove, we actually didn't hear anything in the corn rows next to us, but that doesn't mean much. It's not hard for an animal to move quietly on black dirt between rows. After a few terrifying minutes, we made it to the vehicle and threw our stuff in, rolled up the windows. We breathed a sigh of relief and tried to figure out what the hell happened for a good while before starting the engine and heading back to his place. We actually decided to go back the same night after dropping off the dead spotlight-wielding douchebag at his uncle's place. We took a car instead of the pickup. We rolled up the windows and drove up the driveway. I actually saw one of them lunge toward my window quickly and bolt back into the woods once while we were going up the driveway. This was roughly the same spot that it went after us on foot. Then that was the last we saw of them with our eyes. It was so fast, I still couldn't tell what it was, and I still replay that moment in my head vividly. Once we got up the driveway, we parked next to the woods and rolled down the window just a crack so we could hear better. I bet the damn thing was 6 feet away from my passenger window a few times, but I could never see it in the dim moonlight. But I sure as hell could hear it, and so could Brandon. We also tried to flash the car's lights on a couple of times just to try and catch one in the open, but we never had the right timing. We'd only catch the tail end of something. A day later, we brought the truck back up there and camped out on the back. We wanted to kill one of these things and figure out what it was. We thought maybe one of them was out there, but we could never really tell for sure if we were just paranoid and hearing things at that point. We thought we may have heard them, but there was a breeze, so we're thinking it could have been just swaying branches. To this day, I have no idea what they were. We're in west central Minnesota, and our only ideas of what it could be are, I don't know, some kind of creature running through the area or from out of area, because we have no idea what it could be. In the end, we'll never know for sure, but in a weird way, I'd never trade that experience for anything else. So, what'd you think of those? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Also, down in the description is an email that you can send your story to if you'd like to, and it'll be in a video sometime. Down in the description as well is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way. But of course, just watching the video, commenting, sharing with people, liking, subscribing, all that good stuff is great too and helps the channel. So, with that, I think that I will see you in the next one. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me, and thank you for watching.